Hey guys, and welcome to my next YouTube video. In today's tutorial, we'll be building a simple carousel built using the React framework. And as we see here, we have a linear gradient background with some comic book images that automatically shift from the left. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to enter the command npx create react app, and you can title this whatever you want. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just get rid of all the things we don't need here. So I'll just delete all this, get rid of this, and same thing in app.js. We can get rid of this and clean up everything here. Let's also run the app using npm start. So as we see here, we just have a simple blank page. And now the very first thing I'm going to do is create that linear gradient background that we saw at the beginning of the video. So a useful trick we can do is go to this website, uigradients.com, which has many different examples of UI gradients. And one that I'm going to use right here, what we can do is get the CSS code right away, and we'll copy this in. So for the app.css, I'll make this a width 100% and height 100 VH, so it takes the entire width, the height of the viewport. And now I'll just copy that CSS code for the linear gradient, and let's see what it looks like. Perfect. So here we just have a CSS gradient that takes up the entire screen. Next, what I'll do is create a folder titled assets for the comic book images, and I'm going to go ahead and import some comic book images. So now we have 3 comic book images. So let's go ahead and import these images. So now let's go ahead and render these 3 images. For the class name, I'll just title this card. And I'll do this for all 3 comics. Except for one of them, I'll change the class name to card left and card right. And for the center one, I'll call it card active. So let's see what this looks like. Doesn't look too pretty, so we'll have to apply some CSS styling. So in our app.css, let's create a card class. And I'll also create a carousel container to hold all these cards. So I'll just make this a width of 100% and height of 100%. And as well, we'll give this a position of relative. So we'll have the cards inside this carousel positioned in an absolute way, and that's why we need this. So in here, I'll just wrap these cards inside the carousel container. So for the card itself, I'll make it so that it's positioned directly in the center of the container. What we can do to position this directly in the center of the parent is give it an absolute position and put top 0, right 0, bottom 0, left 0, and finally margin auto. We'll also give this a fixed width and height. And we'll give it object fit cover so that the image maintains its aspect ratio. Let's see what that looks like. Perfect. So now the only issue here is that these are stacked on top of each other. So from before, we gave one image a class name of card left and another one of card right. So let's go ahead and add those styles. We'll also start with the card active for the center. We'll leave this empty for now and come back to it later. For card left, what we'll do is give it a transform, translate x minus 125% and a scale of 0.8. We'll also give this a transition of 500 milliseconds and opacity of 0.3. We'll do the exact same for the card right, except make sure that this is a positive value for the translate. There we go. So now we have a center card, that's the active one. We have a card on the left and a card on the right. So now this is good, but we don't have any movement. It's static. So we have to implement that logic to transition between different comic books. Let's go ahead and do that now. To do this, I'm going to use state. So let's go ahead and import that. And I'll also be using useEffect in order to automatically transition between the comic books. So for our state, I'm going to call this index, set index, and we'll start this as 0. I'm also going to create an array containing all the cards. So I'll just title this cards. And again, I'll just copy this for the second and third image. And I'll make sure each one has a unique ID. I'll actually make this a string. And the next thing I'm going to do is make a modulo function. Now, the reason I'm using a custom modulo function we'll get into in greater detail, but I want to make sure that what this returns is a positive value. So we'll check if this is greater than or equal to 0. If so, we'll return the result. Otherwise, we'll add the value m to this. Now, we'll comment this out. And instead, what we'll do is we'll map through the cards one by one. And what we'll do here is get our left index and right index of this state. So let's call this index left, and we'll use the mod function we created earlier, and we'll pass in index minus 1 in order to get what's on the left. And for the value of m, we'll pass in cards.length. So now that we're using our custom modulo function, this will return us a positive value. Otherwise, if we just did something like index minus 1 modulo cards.length, this would give us a negative value. So now let's do the same for index right. Instead of plus 1, we'll do instead of minus 1, we'll do index plus 1 and pass in cards.length as the value for m. So now whatever this index is, when we pass this value in, what's on the left of that index will be stored in this variable, and likewise for what's on the right of that index will be stored on the right. So for the image that we'll return in this map function, for the key I'll give it of item.id, which is the custom, the unique ID we passed in right here. I'll give it a source equal to item.image and just an alt of comic. The thing is, for each image we return, is we want a specific class. So for the one that's on the left, we want to have card left, and for the one that's on the right, we want card right. And likewise for the middle, we want card active. So we need to have some logic to do that. So let's create a variable called class name. We'll just make this a basic string, and then we'll do something like this. If I is equal to index, then it will set class name equal to card active. Else, if I is equal to index right, class name is equal to card right. We'll do this again for left. And for the default case, we'll just give it a class name of card. And finally, we'll pass in the class name here. So this still works. However, the only issue is, again, it's still static and we're not changing that index. So to do that, we'll use the useEffect hook. Now, in this, what we'll do is use the set timeout function. So let's say every 3 seconds or so, we'll increment this state. And in this set timeout, we'll pass in a function to do exactly that. And for the second argument, we'll pass in 3000 for 3 seconds. So what we'll do in this function is use the set index, and what we'll pass it in is index plus 1 modulo cards dot length. And for our dependency, we'll pass in the index. So every time our index changes, after 3 seconds, we'll add a value of 1 and use this modulus operator to wrap it around that array. Let's go ahead and save this and see the output. So it's looking better, but still not perfect. Let's go ahead and edit some of our styles. We don't have anything right now for the card active, so we'll put an opacity of 1, transform scale 1, and z index of 99. For the card default, we'll also pass an opacity of 0. We're also missing a transition right here of 500 milliseconds, and that should do the trick. There we go. And we're all done. We built a simple carousel using the React framework and the useEffect hook. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know if you have any recommendations for future videos. Thanks.